Perspective 360, the show that brings you authentic communication in order to educate and advance conscious and courageous conversations of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're encouraging you to use your voice and tell your story. Will the legacy you leave be on the right side of history? Let's talk. Join our guests, Monigo Segbe-Halley, Chris Saunders, Leah Holston, Monica Black, Frank Nix, and Wendy Doolittle.
All right. Well, thank you to all the panelists who have joined us today. For our viewers, I would like to introduce you to a great pool of candidates here in just a second, of panelists that are going to be with us. And my name is Nancy LaMons, and I would like to welcome you to Perspective 360. Today, our topic is Black economic wealth and political power. And so there's been a lot of conversations that we've had, we've heard either through social media or on the news stream. And so we have a panel of experts today that are going to be able to talk about that in a little bit deeper of a detail. And so our purpose for Perspective 360 for those who are new is really to educate and advance the conscious conversations around race, privilege, diversity, equity, and inclusion in our country. However, we have seen it now have a broader impact across the world. But we want to make sure we can control and have these discussions. Because there's so much to unpack to this. And so we want to make sure that we understand what's really happening in our communities. And we would like to be able to say that we come to you with truth and candor. And then the other thing is not just talking about it, because we definitely want to advance the conversation and have you participate in that conversation with us. But also we want to make sure that we leave you with an action item or actionable items that you can do in your family, in your household, or in the community to make sure as a people we continue to move the entire agenda forward. Because there's one thing to be said around, us being the minority today, but there are tons of things that we can do ourselves that is within our control, and that's what we want to talk about today. Black economic wealth and political power. So without further ado, I am so pleased to have Monigo Segbe-Halley as my co-host today. She was actually a panelist on the last show, and I welcome you again, my sister. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Always good to be with you, Nancy, and I have the esteemed pleasure to introduce our panelists. Today we have a powerhouse in the house, and first of all, I'd like to introduce Chris Saunders. He's with the National Bank Examiner based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. We also, just give a wave so that people can see you. Just give a wave when I call your name. There you go. We also have Frank Nix. He's a Senior Director and Treasurer based in Frisco, Texas. We also have Leah Holston. She's an owner and Chief Executive Officer, and she's based in Detroit, Michigan. We also have Monica Williams Black. She's a Regional Vice President based in Cincinnati, Ohio. And finally, last but definitely not least, Wendy Doolittle. She's a Chief Executive Officer, and she's based in Springfield, Ohio. Welcome to all our panelists.
And our vision, I just want to make sure that I keep that front and center. It's really fivefold. One is to collaborate with allies and to build awareness and positivity that affects change. Two is to be courageous in confronting social and economic norms impacting the Black community. The third pillar is community empowerment development to enhance the lives of the entire community. The fourth is conscious about social issues impacting the Black community. And then finally is to have conversations that lead to actionable items aimed at empowering the Black community. So with that, Chris, I think I'm going to start with you. And I know that our topic today is Black economic power, is Black economic wealth and political power. However, I want to stay a little bit higher for a second, just because I am still hearing, and perhaps you all may be as well, there being conversation, consternation, concern about, is this real? Is this whole thing of race real? Why are we still talking about this and privilege? And so I want to start kind of at a 30,000-foot view. And I guess my question is as simple as this for you, Chris, but maybe it's not simple, is how is it that we can send somebody to the moon? We can send somebody to the moon, but we still cannot tackle this topic of race and privilege in the United States?
That is a very difficult question, but I think the first step is you have to define privilege. And, different people hear different things when the word privilege is mentioned. In my opinion, privilege actually is an unearned advantage. And when you look at it from that viewpoint, what you need to understand is no one gives up an advantage willingly. No one is going to surrender an advantage. You have to couple that with the fact that because that privilege has existed for so long, it is so ingrained in American society, it's like oxygen. It's there and we don't even realize it. And that works on both sides. So, I'm not sure how you eliminate privilege because certain people don't believe it exists. How do you convince someone to give something up that, in their opinion, doesn't exist? And the reason it doesn't exist to them is because it has been around since before they were born. That is just in their mind, that is just the natural order of things.
Wow. Yeah, that's when you think about that goes deep, right? And it goes deep into a lot of things that Wendy has expressed before. Wendy, I'm just going to ask: is there anything that you'd like to add to that? Because Chris brings up a great point that it goes back so deep.
Yeah, I think that's spot on when you described it like oxygen. It's so the thought of when we think of white hate or white rage, black rage, it's often looked at it, we'll talk about white hate, but it's that white rage, and it comes from, it's our government, it's our system, we need you to fall in line. And even if you try to assimilate it, that still doesn't cut it. So it's like you either get on board or you leave, but you're never fully on board because you're not, we've been seen as second-class citizens since we arrived. And so when he's talking about it's like oxygen, it's been there since the very beginning. So it's very difficult for many white people to understand that concept. So I completely agree with what he's saying. It's like we are constantly under oppression. So that's where some of the black rage is coming from. We're constantly under oppression, and our counterparts don't understand what the oppression is because it's just what it has been, and it's how we've been viewed. So I agree 100%. I thought that was well said.
Let me ask just a brief question, a follow-up question on that one, Wendy. So yes, we clearly have those that exist or who exist. It's ingrained, right? It is oxygen. So how do we battle with the idea that there are also allies who think differently?
Absolutely.
So what is it that's helped one person perhaps transition and another not to accept the concept of privilege?
So here's why I think that's a good question, and a good way of looking at it. Well, one, we don't want to be stereotyped that way, right? We don't want to be stereotyped that way, so we don't want to stereotype any other group that way. That's one thing. But if you look at over time, we used to talk about something simple: black people swimming or not swimming, and black folks and dogs. And we all smile because we know where that came from, generationally where that came from. But today, most of our kids can swim. Many of us can swim, and many of us own dogs. So it's like over time, that can change, and that has changed. The more you are assimilated, or not even assimilated, more you are interacting with a group of people and you get to know them and understand who they are, it changes your perception. And that has happened quite a bit over time. And I'll tell you right now, so I work in the field of addictions. And when this opiate epidemic hit, for the small community that I live in, what was our South Side and our community, it has a lot of Caucasians now. Because when addiction hit their families, they were kind of thrown out and migrated this way. Our black side, our South side, does not look like it's primarily African American anymore. So there's been a lot of interaction. So it did not surprise me at the time we were doing the Black Lives Matter march locally, there were just as many white people marching as there were black people. So I just think over time we have begun to interact, and that mindset that started from the very beginning, some of that is starting to dissipate at a lower level. Now up here, we still have systems issues, obviously, but I think that's why we're starting to see some of the change.
Kind of socioeconomic. Mo?
I actually want to move to Frank. Chris, I like the comment that you made about privilege being an unearned advantage. Frank, I've seen a couple of interviews on TV where you have the Morgan Freeman, you have the Lil Wayne, who they have actually said they've never had any racist actions against them in their 90210 bubble. And so I'd like to have you unpack that, where you have, Black Americans who say that there's not racism. I've lifted myself up by my bootstraps. How do you respond to a comment like that?
Yeah, I think that's asinine. I think that, anyone who could make a statement like that, I think demonstrates a great deal of social and emotional immaturity. You've got to understand that, in today's time that, the idea of racism is so prevalent and pervasive in our society that, when a Black man kneels to protest against social injustice or police brutality, that the narrative changes and people want to talk about that this is, you protesting against America. It's absolutely at the core, as Chris mentioned earlier, of this country's the foundation of the core documents for America being established, and so I think that that's not even a valid question anymore. I mean, we see it every day when we turn on the television. They know that racism exists, and we have been getting the short end of the stick for a really long time. So. Yeah, I don't think that's even a valid question given everything that's transpired in recent, days and weeks.
Monica, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, Wendy, it goes back to, I think, what Wendy just talked about, the whole integration. I think there is a socioeconomic layer to this that hopefully we can get to, as we go through the conversation, because there's a political aspect and then, of course, the economic aspect, and that socioeconomic kind of hits right between the two, I think. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was reading an article recently in the Wall Street Journal, and there was a guy that was talking about just how far we have slid backwards in terms of our earnings, and back into the times of the 1950s. We made some progress in the 60s and 70s, but if you look at where we are as a people right now, we're earning about 50 cents on the dollar for our white counterparts, and so until we have economic equality, that's absolutely an issue.
No, I hear you. And Monica, I'd love for you to weigh in, especially, there's also some rhetoric out there where people, there are some Black folk who are not aligned with the Black Lives Matter movement. They feel like the issue at hand is Black on Black crime. I'd love to hear your point of view on that. And then, Frank, if you could come back and weigh in on that as well, because I know you from the south side of Chicago, so I'm sure you have a point of view. Monica, what are your thoughts?
You're blocked.
You're on mute.
You're muted, Monica.
Got it. Thank you. So in my opinion, the Black Lives Matter movement is based on the victimization of on Black Americans with law enforcement, with no accountability whatsoever, and just targeting us because we are Black. And there are crimes committed in all communities, crimes committed, Blacks on other Blacks or non-Blacks on other Blacks, and crime is wrong. But one thing that I do want to say, though, is that I have a problem many times with the phrase Black on Black crime, because many times it's not talked about with white on white crime or Asian on Asian crime. And it puts us in another stigma, like we're the only ones creating crime. And it's known that people create crimes on people that are similar to them in their close proximity, you know? And so it's just not good for me. Because I think that's just used completely against us. So that's how I feel. Two different issues, black on black crime per se, in addition to the Black Lives Matters movement.
Yeah, I think that the term black on black crime is kind of a misnomer. We know that there's never been a crime perpetrated on another individual, black or otherwise, because of they're black, unless it's a hate crime. I think that crime is about socioeconomics, and the plight in Chicago is bad. You have a whole generation that has not been properly educated. They don't have access to financial markets, financial literacy, and they're hopeless, and they feel that I don't care about myself, so I don't care about you, and it creates this environment where without having opportunities for advancement, the hood is going to stay the hood, and we're looking for opportunities to participate in the American dream. And too often, I think that there's a whole generation. I look back to when I grew up in the 70s. We had programs to get you out of the streets, to do something more constructive with your time, and all that's been abolished. And you have kids nowadays that are just without a father figure in the household, and without real hope for their future, and it implodes. And I think that this is a topic we could talk about for a long time, because I think there's some other underlying aspects in Chicago specifically that really fuel that kind of emotion. We're lacking structure. We're lacking opportunities, and so it's a real thing in Chicago, but it has nothing to do with the fact that it's a black crime that's being committed against one another. It's socioeconomics.
No, I completely agree with you. In fact, the term was coined by white segregationists to divide black people. And so it was a rhetoric used to divide us, because you're right. I mean, we don't over-index in killing our own race more than any other race. What we over-index is in when there's a crime that's committed, we do more time. So and that's for another show, but you're absolutely right on the black on black crime.
Wendy, let me just talk about that just a little bit. And you touched on this, I think, earlier as we even talk about what I'm hearing and kind of what Chris talked about in regards to the oxygen, Frank, and going back to the 70s. There's something systemic here, right? And I think there's something systemic. We all know that, right? In regards to the black rage and the white hate. And I really do struggle with, personally, just someone who doesn't have, it's not understanding or knowing is one thing, right? And if you go back to 1619, you jump to 1865, you look at after that, everything that's happened from housing, right? Now we're like on average 1/10 of the wealth is what black people have versus white people. And so you have to understand that story. And perhaps we as a society did this to ourselves because of what we did with history. We took history out of social studies and we gave the history that we wanted to be told. And so the question I have for you is, when it comes to white hate and black rage, one, is it justified? Is it justified that there is black rage? And then is it justified, I can't even say this one, is it justified for black rage? Because I don't think that there's hate that's justified in any shape, form, or fashion. But there is this level of, and I think actually Chris mentioned it, it comes back to when it's unearned, who's going to give that up willingly? Mm-hmm. Who is going to give that up willingly?
Nobody. So nobody's going to give it up willingly. Mm-hmm. So had we left history in the schools, it still was not going to be our history. So that is what we are responsible for that as a people. Yeah. If you go back and you think about the riots, right? If you think about Greenwood, Tulsa, and you see what we were able to build. We know what we're capable of building when we're collectively working together. The problem is when you watch, even when you think about Philly, what happened in Philly, when you watch white supremacists decimate, or the government decimate the community with no help to rebuild, nothing coming from the government to rebuild this up, it creates this sense of defeat and this sense of helplessness and hopelessness. Now you couple that with how they have created projects, and this type of housing is pretty much what Frank said. When people are experiencing this oppression and collective, community is feared and fought, then we end up kind of, you develop this mentality of, I got to get mine, I got to survive, I've got to, and that's what we're seeing played out over and over and over. Now, for those folks those of us who may have elevated some out of poverty, maybe middle class, even maybe higher than that, as Lil Wayne's describing, he's never experienced it because he's arrived. No matter what level you're at, you're still going to experience it because you're never fully going to be integrated. You're never fully going to assimilate with this population because they're not going to let you. It's just how it is. So the problem is, what do we need to do to rebuild a sense of community, because we have to have our own. That's the only way we're going to get full acceptance and inclusion. That's it. That's it. So expecting, our counterparts to fully get rid of Black hate or Black rage, it's not going to happen. We have to create this narrative ourselves. And so I think too many times we've sat around and we're kind of waiting for them to stop hating. It's not going to happen. And just like Chris said, it's not going to happen that they're going to give up privilege. This is on us to do it. We've got to do it. Say again,
I don't think that the term hate is really the genesis of this. I think it's really fear. And they fear that we're going to do to them what they've done to us. And so they know their history. They know what they've done, and all of the lies and the killing and the deceit and stealing of our history and trying to pass it off as it's theirs. And so they fear us. They fear our prowess. They fear our physical being. They fear our intellect, and they fear what's going to happen to them when we wake up. So
I think it's at different levels. Like I believe, I don't know if any of you guys have read Hillbilly Elegy. If you've read it, there is a class of poor white people that are very uneducated and really don't have a clue about our history. They believe the propaganda that they've seen. The black on black crime, they buy that. They're not educated enough to understand that white on white crime is greater. So there's that piece. And then that's what I said before, systemically, we're talking about economics now as to why we need to stay in the state of oppression. So that's why when I said earlier, Frank, I was like, I don't know if I would say hate as much as it's white rage, because they're trying to maintain what they have.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think you see that in Brexit as well. I mean, that's exactly what's driving Brexit and what allowed them to get someone like Trump in office. It's that fear and the fact that they want to hold on to that power and don't want to see labor redistributed.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I want to go, Leah. Let me ask you a question. So we talk about BLM, and Monica talked about that a little bit. Black Lives Matter. I'm going to say with all capital letters, right? And then there's so many people, a ton who support it, of course, the movement, and then so many people who don't. Some believe it's become a marketing campaign, right? And if I post BLM, then I'm in. I've done what I needed to do. And so there's the aspect that Monica talked about, which is really about the police, right, and police brutality. And then there's other conversations that I hear kind of bubbling up, which is, I'm going to call it small BLM, just period, Black Lives Matter. And that agenda, or what they're saying is that, no, I'm not a fan of the BLM movement, but because there's so many other things that we need to focus on: housing, education, financial, being financially astute, right? There's so many other things that we have been historically oppressed in, that they're saying that somebody needs to look at this. Look, somebody needs to look at this holistically instead of just focusing on police brutality. We have all these other things that we're behind in as well. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that is, in my opinion, that's a distraction. And by that, what I mean is that they're trying to distract us away from the point or the mission or the purpose. And both of those things are important. It's important that we focus on police brutality. It's also important that we focus on inequality and injustice. You can't, it's not required that you do one or the other. I mean, they're all important issues. And I think that where we always get caught up is people distract you from the purpose and then you back away. But no, we need to tackle this at all angles. And every position that we have on Black Lives Matter, whether it's uppercase, lowercase, or just power to the people, it's all relevant, it all matters, and it's all important to everyone. And it's important that we all focus on areas that we have expertise in so that we can move the agenda forward. So I don't really get caught up in whether it's uppercase, lowercase, black print, white print. It doesn't matter to me. The purpose and the point is, let's focus on the inequality that's happening in our world. Let's focus on the disadvantages, and those people that have resources, let's get those people in the forefront and stop worrying about issues that really don't matter. And that one to me is one that doesn't matter. What matters is focusing on those issues and moving our agenda forward in all areas.
Yeah. Great point. Anybody else want to add anything to that? All right, Mo?
Well, I'll move us a little bit to the Black economic wealth in this discussion. And Frank, I'd like to start with you. Since the bus boycotts in the 60s that lasted over 380 days, I don't know if we've had a successful boycott. I'd love to get your perspective on the blackouts, the protests, the marches. Are they helping the Black agenda towards economic wealth?
Yeah, I think that you're spot on. I like the way that you frame that. You know, we've been protesting for over 60 years in this country in order to highlight social injustice and economic reform. But now something's different. I mean, it just feels different, right? I mean, you have more support from others in our fight for equality. And what I'm starting to see, and what I think we're all starting to see, is that a lot of corporations are starting to not just, change the narrative, but are actually starting to put their dollars to use. And I think that's where it really starts to be impactful. And so there's been a number of corporates in recent weeks that have made significant contributions or efforts. I think Bank of America came out and said that over a 4-year period, they were going to be donating over $1 billion to various social economic programs. Nike and the Jordan brand committed to over $100 million over the next 3 years. Comcast committed to over $100 million. And I think the Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical company, committed to over $50 million. And so with that kind of wealth, certainly something is changing. But we still have a long way to go. As long as we're underrepresented in the C-suite and in boardrooms, it's not over. I was looking at some statistics earlier, and I think that it showed that we represent only 2% of the executive roles in corporate America. 2%.
Yeah, and I actually want to just kind of marinate on that point a little bit more. You have these large organizations, these Fortune 75 organizations, donating hundreds of millions of dollars, which, let's just be realistic, is maybe 1/10 of their total revenues that they bring in annually. But that's besides the point. They're donating hundreds of millions of dollars to a cause. And I've read some statistics that, if we were paid reparations, it would be in the trillions of dollars. So is that enough? Is Bank of America, Walmart, J&J giving 1/10 of their revenue enough to move us towards Black economic wealth? And that's open to anyone.
I think it's a start, and it's a start in the right direction, but no, absolutely it's not enough. I mean, we need to be better represented in the executive level positions, as I mentioned. We need to be better represented in boards. We need to have, more financial literacy in our community, more economic reform. So no, absolutely, it's not over, but it's a good start.
Yeah, I think I just want to comment on that. I feel I agree with you, Frank. It's definitely a good start, but I think that donating money without having a voice, as you said, on your boards or in your senior level positions, you're donating blindly. So you need to diversify your senior level positions, your boards, so that when you are making these donations, you are making them to things that matter. I think a lot of these corporations are, I'll call it saving face to, make these donations, but I want some meat behind it. Incorporate a diverse boardroom so that when you are making statements, just like with Gucci when they put out that ridiculous garment, I'll call it, that's because they don't have a diversified boardroom. So money is great, but if you don't have substance behind it, you really aren't making the moves that you think you're making. So that's my 2 cents.
Oh, I agree with you, Leah. In fact, I will be radical, as people know me to be, and say, keep your money, give me the board seat, give me the CEO position, give me equity so I can start my own business, and keep your money.
Absolutely.
I want to move to you,
where the
Monica.
change will be.
Leah. Exactly.
No, I was just saying that's where the change will be.
Let me do this. Chris, did you have a point?
Yeah, I do. I think that we have significantly more economic potential for influence than we do politically. And the reason that we do is because politically, the effect of gerrymandering has that's pretty much, we have a very, very few seats. We're underrepresented as far as our percentage of the population. So it's like a double-edged sword. But when you think about the economic influence that we can have, it's immense. The problem is that our approach is disorganized. And I say disorganized on purpose because at one time, if you think back to the Montgomery bus boycott, we were organized. The reason it is disorganized is intentional. We intentionally disorganized when it comes to our economic influence. The one silver cloud is that as people become more and more tech savvy and they can go on the internet and create a circle and influence, your voice is magnified exponentially, whereas we didn't have that before. Of course, we need to have better representation as far as the corner office goes, because with diversity comes understanding. Somebody would have spoke up and said, that is not a good idea to Gucci. They would have they would say no, and everybody, they would have been sitting around clueless. Like, what do you mean that's not a good idea? Hopefully, the person that's sitting in the room would have said, here's why. And a few of those people in that room would have been like, I didn't look at it that way. That's what you get, in my opinion, when you have somebody in the C-suite, somebody that really can make decisions. But as far as our economic potential, it hasn't even begun to be tapped. I mean, those people did things, they literally, for 381 days, walked. They organized taxis to get people to and fro. Against all odds, they finally brought the city of Montgomery down to their knees economically. That's why it worked. It wasn't because they felt bad.
Exactly.
They couldn't stand to lose any more money. They'd been losing money for over a year. And finally they said, you know what, we're going to have to change this. And I think that same lesson applies today. Some corporations will do it because it might feel good. all corporations will do it because it's going to cost them money.
Wow.
You're
Well
absolutely
said.
right. You know, outside of internet threats, that's the number one risk right now. Is we talked about it before the show began. The expense on the P&L, mad black folk. Nobody wants that expense on their P&L because it will erode EBITDA. Monica, I want to go to you really quick. We talked a little bit about. I think Frank was saying that black people are earning 50 cents on the dollar to their white counterparts. And I want to understand your point of view on the Black America's buying power. While we're earning 50 cents on the dollar, we're spending 51 cents on all these brands. What is our buying power, and how can we educate ourselves on, to Chris's point, on the voice we have around that buying power?
Okay. And so the buying power with Black America right now is about $1.3 trillion per year. And that is a whole lot of money. But unfortunately, we're high consumers too. So we will go and buy a lot of beauty products, clothes, cars, whatever things that do not appreciate and value. And a lot of advertising dollars are put towards our community because we're visual and we will go and buy those items. But our economic power, it is like really limited. I looked up some statistics, and according to the New York Times, for every $100 in white wealth, Black families hold $5.04. $5.04. And the Economic Pay Institute found that 1 in 4 Black households have zero or negative net worth. And the net worth is the difference between what you own and what you owe. And you can make a whole lot of money and have a negative net worth because you have a lot of student loans, you don't have any liquid assets, So it is a matter of financial literacy, and not just for people at our age. It needs to be taught in grade school, in high school. There has to be a completely different mindset that things are great, but I'd rather you look at my bank statement because that would be greater. I mean, it really will be, but people need to sit down and with the financial planner, that's what I would say, and look at not just short term, but also long term. Do you have a game plan to get out of debt? Are you properly protecting your assets? Do you have a written plan that's going to get you to where you want to be? And what many people do is hear no evil and see no evil and everything will work its way out. Well, nothing works its way out without a plan. So financial literacy, having a great financial planner, and making sure that the future is supposed to be for you and not for everybody else that does not look like you.
Right. So what I hear you saying is we have to wrestle with economic empowerment at home first, individually, before we can do it as a community.
Correct.
Let me ask a question to that, and this can go to Monica or anyone. So the boycott, there's a boycott, right, coming up that has been, surfaced through all of us. I think it's the 7th, right? What do you all think about that? Is it going to provide any amount of wealth, or what do you think the messaging is, or the outcome that we can expect by this blackout?
Okay, well, I'll just say a blackout for a day is fine. However, we're high consumers anyway. So we already know where the money is going to go. And most people would just hold on to everything the day before or get everything on the day after. So those periods in order for there to be an impact. Like Chris said, 381 days. We need a whole lot of days in order for people to say, oh, well, this is what's going to happen and this is the impact we're going to have, and then redirect those monies back into the Black community.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Monica, is that a blackout to me, it doesn't really have a lot of meat behind it for a day. Where we really will have power and influence is if we start looking at our networks of Black-owned businesses. Why are we not putting more energy and efforts into supporting our Black-owned businesses? That's where our money needs to start circulating, so that, you know, when we spend our money, we're spending it in our communities, and that money then helps our communities. We have programming that's not funded in our own communities. Why are we not putting efforts into those you know, companies and organizations and networks that are trying to help our communities? You know, right now, funding is really a big issue for Black-owned businesses right now with everything that's going on with COVID-19. So why wouldn't we focus our energies and efforts in creating a database or a network of Black-owned businesses so that we can support and put our money in that? That's a blackout. That's where we're going to have power. But a day of not spending, that let's really touch the issue. The issue is putting our wealth back into us, and then building those resources and knowledge and teaching our generations after us how we can have independence and freedom through entrepreneurship, Black owned. That's where the big deal is for me.
I agree, Leah. You know, when we think about Tulsa, well, they say that dollar went around 19 times before it left the community. And then we also get consumed with...
We're at 6 hours now.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I mean, I'm serious.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
absolutely.
That's ridiculous.
And the thing is even if it did cost you a little more to buy from a Black-owned business, it's staying in your community. So it's still coming back around. It's what you're pouring into. So I agree. I think, you know, the blackout is nice, but one day is nothing. The emphasis really needs to be on supporting Black-owned businesses.
Absolutely. That's a blackout. That is a blackout.
That is.
And Nancy, I wish they would have talked to somebody in retail when they did the blackout, because it's on a Tuesday, which is a slow sales day anyway. Retailers are expecting slow sales. We couldn't have done it on a Friday or a Saturday.
Thank you.
Right. And the other thing is, don't expect a discount when you do go to the Black-owned business. You pay full somewhere else.
Amen.
Please pay full.
Nancy, please stop getting me hyped up.
You know, I want to, because I know and this is a great dialogue, and our time is winding out so quickly. I want to kind of merge into this political aspect, if we could, just for a second. And so we talked about earning power. We talked about kind of Black economic wealth, how we need to, as Monica said, just make sure we have a plan. You know, we're more, you know, having money doesn't, you rich is different than being wealthy, right? And so we want to make sure that we have the wealth within our society. I think, you know, if we think about it politically then, and we're getting close to elections, Leah, I'll start with you, and then I think Mo has a follow-up question for Chris perhaps, but Leah, for you, how important, and I know we say this, right, but for me, I think from my own perspective, I think about those, my parents, right, as close as that generation, what they had to go through to vote. Half of us don't vote. You know, we think that if we're not voting, then we don't know that if we're not voting, that is a vote, right? Because again, in that instance, silence is still consensus on whoever gets elected. Can you talk to us a little bit about how important the vote is? And is the presidential vote most important? Are there other avenues that we need to be conscious of and start participating in as well?
Yeah, I mean, I look at Michigan. I'll talk about Michigan. We've got our primary elections that are coming up in August. Those elections are very important to our communities. They touch the lives of the people that are around us. The presidential election, I would say in most instances, would not be as important, but I think with the climate that we're in right now, it is very important as well. So, you know, for me, I think that it's important that not only do we vote, but that we actually spend time and understand what we're voting for. I think too many times people go to the polls and they're voting for they'll vote a Democratic ticket. But you really need to educate yourselves on what those issues are, what those candidates stand for, because sometimes you don't fall in a Democratic or Republican straight ticket. So I think that's one of the biggest things. So voting is very important, I think, but also educating ourselves on what we're voting for and how they affect our communities. Because that is, to me, the biggest thing that's happening is that we're failing our communities by not voting or not understanding what we're voting for. So until we can do that, I don't think we'll see the changes that we want to see. And just piggybacking a little bit on that is just with the census. I mean, I think that as a nation and as a culture, we are not doing our part when it comes to the census. That census directly affects funding for the communities that we live in. And we don't understand that. And the effects behind that, the after effects of that, we have to live with that. So I think if we do our education up front, we understand, number one, what we're voting for, who we're voting for, and what they stand for. Whether it's the presidential election or the elections of senators, it's all important if we're knowledgeable. So that's my take on it.
So let me ask a question. So you're saying just because we black folks, we're not supposed to vote all Democratic? And this is for
I'm not going to I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but I am going to tell you to be informed when you vote. So don't always look at what the candidate is, whether they're Democratic or Republican. Understand what they stand for, because that is really what's going to affect change. So I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight, Nancy. I'm not going to fight.
Nancy, I want to say the elephant in the room. Nancy. I know that some of us saw the Breakfast Club interview with former Vice President Joe Biden on there, where he said, if you don't vote for me, then you ain't black folk.
Right.
Should I be mad? Should I be vexed? What kind of emotions should we evoke, or what kind of strategy should we move forward with after that comment? This is for anyone.
I think that in today's context, right, of dealing with Trump in office, I don't care what Biden does or what scandal he's in. He probably needs to have a good talking to behind the shed. But listen, the agenda today is to get this orange-faced clown out of office. And whatever it takes to make that happen, we need to get out and vote and make sure that that occurs. And so under normal circumstances, I probably would be a lot more upset that someone would just assume the black vote. But in today's environment, keeping in context, there's not much you could do. He's not going to get my vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that one. When it came to that comment, I agree with his sentiment, but the delivery was flawed.
Sure.
That's pretty much, had Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for me, then you aren't doing what's best for you and your people, which is exactly what he was saying. If he had used that terminology,
non-issue.
Be upset about. He got comfortable.
That's what I was going to say. He got too comfortable.
He got comfortable. And getting comfortable when you're a politician is dangerous.
Right. It used to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
But I agree with Frank. I don't see how you have any choice. Honestly, I just don't. And have we been in the bar or whatever in a private setting, I would have said exactly what he said to a black person.
Yeah. Well, let the church say amen. I know Nancy.
Just to add on real quickly about the voting, presidential election is all great and well too, but we need to really think about judges, prosecutors, when we're voting locally, because that's where a lot of the change needs to happen. In most communities, at least I can speak for mine, the number of African Americans disproportionately being sent to jail for the same crimes that whites do and the amount of time they're getting, it's still ridiculous. And we can vote in the seats of people that are making some of those decisions, and we need to show up there.
This is Chris, a prime example of the importance of prosecutors is what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. There were 2 prosecutors that passed on that. 2. Think about that. Had that been a black prosecutor, there's no way in the world that they would have passed on pressing charges on those 3 people. It literally, had that idiot not thought that tape would exonerate them, chances are they still wouldn't. They'd still be free. And those 2 prosecutors, and what upsets me about it is no one is talking about bringing those 2 prosecutors or bringing them to justice. And in my opinion, they should be. They should be. So just on the local thing, prosecutors and sheriffs as well.
Yeah.
Prosecutors, sheriffs, and judges, because you get to vote for judges locally. And then I'll get off my soapbox.
No, this is good. This is good. Mo, are you going to ask the question?
I have one final question. I know we're getting at time. Leah talked about you need to be informed when you're voting. And, MLK in his one of his last books, Where We Go From Here, he says equality has no common language. Some people just say, I just want equality. I want to be equal. What does that mean? What does that mean for us? What does it look like as far as legislature when we say we want to be equal? This is for anybody.
I think it starts off with financial equality. Pay me for what I'm worth. And we talked about it. We're getting 50 cents on the dollar to our white counterparts. I think it starts there, but it's a very wide net that you'd have to cast.
Yeah, I'd definitely say, I would definitely say when it comes to equality, not only, I agree 100% with Frank, give us the money that we deserve and that we are, we do the job, pay us for that. I also feel like the resources that we have just as a community need to be equal. The ability to get a home loan should be equal, or a small business loan should be equal. Those are areas that I think we fight so hard. There's been a lot of people that have been rallying around and helping in those areas. Like I look at, oh my gosh, I can't think of the gentleman's name right now. You guys can help me. That did that paid off all the student loans for the people the guys at Morehouse. We need more of that. That's equal. That's being equal, and that's what we're looking for.
Let me ask one final question to take Wendy probably 1 minute for this question. Wendy, I'm going to wrap up with you before kind of Mo, I think, takes us home here. Is how long do you think it would take for us to reach equality? Generation, 2 generations?
We're a long way off. We are a long way off.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I ask that question is because I've heard people say in the community or on television, when are we going to stop talking about this? When are we going to get tired? And I guess my perspective is that we can't get tired.
Yeah, the oppressed can't get tired. The oppressor can get tired of hearing it. The oppressed can't get tired because the foot's on our neck. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
The question is, when are they going to start talking about it? We're talking about it, but when are they going to have the conversation as well within their own communities? So, some people are having conversations with us, but they need to have those conversations in their own community to change the dynamics of their communities. That's where a lot of the change needs to happen, is those people that are allies, they need to be talking to their own community. Take that message to your people so that they can understand why you have the position that you have.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Because you're right. There's a lot of people talking to Black folk right now saying, tell me, educate me, what do I need to do differently? But what's even more powerful is if they become radicalized or become ambassadors and go by yourself to your community and say, this is what we need to do. Besides marching. Marching is good.
Right.
There ain't no money in marching.
That's right.
Well, guess what? Our time is up, folks, and I'm so happy that you all joined us on the show today on Perspective 360. Phenomenal job at just, again, helping us advance the conversation with candor, with truth. and with courage. And a few things that a few folks I want to take on kind of the back end. One is there's Felicia Jackson. So thank you so much for helping me on the back end from a tech perspective and just supporting Heaven Nez Cree. If you like the video that came out, she's an artist. Please reach out to her at www.heavennezcree.com, and she's great from a media perspective. So I encourage you to reach out to her. The other thing is that Leah, this whole show is also to promote Black-owned businesses and supporting one another as well. Leah, can you just give us a 30-second clip on your business and how we can reach out and support you from that perspective?
Absolutely. My husband and I, we are Black business owners for H2O Life, which includes a martial arts school, a women's boutique, and as well as a photo booth company. So we are out here. We're on social media. We're in a lot of the Black networking sites on Facebook, as well as different networking within the city. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied right now. So again, I think for me, what the biggest message I want to leave you guys with is, be thoughtful with your finances. Be thoughtful with your spending. Every day, look at what you're going to spend your money on and see, can I spend that within the Black community? So if there's anything that you can, take from a Black business owner, that is what we want you to do. Be very thoughtful in how you manage your finances.
And I think Monica or Chris, which one of you has your own business? Monica? Chris? Monica, yeah.
Okay.
You're on.
Okay, I would say that learning more about finances, gaining a better understanding, and not just making choices without knowing the background behind those choices, because otherwise there will never be economic wealth. And what I do is sit down with families, show them exactly what they need to do in every facet of their financial life. You may already have something in place, but it doesn't mean that you can explain to me what you have, which is very important. And so having wealth creation, it makes a significant difference. And I do financial plans at no cost. I just ask for a commitment to do better and to provide 5 to 10 referrals so that I can continue to educate in the community.
And how can they reach you? Is there an email address or where they can reach you?
Yes, I'll just give my regular email address, which is Monica, Monica, V, like Victoria, Black, like the color, at gmail.com.
All right. Thank you for that. And the other one, Mo. So, Mo, you're doing nonprofit. Can you talk about Light?
Absolutely. Light is the love of my life, the labor of love. It's lifting individuals through education. I'm originally from Liberia, West Africa, and our focus is to educate, empower, and elevate women and children in the diaspora, specifically in Liberia. We do that through workshops and helping them with basic necessities, trying to build our own Wakanda. So if you feel so inclined, please support us, pray for us. You can catch us on lightsaves.org, and we're on all the social media.
And the other thing is that I want to offer up for anyone, if you can reach out to me at perspective360media.com. If you want to have a conversation or connect with any of the panelists, I'm sure with Chris and Frank, Leah, Monica, Wendy, Monigo, if y'all have any questions for them, I would be glad to connect you, because I know that they're committed to making sure that our community is successful, and they will be committed to supporting you in any shape, form, or fashion. Again, that's perspective360media.com. And so without further ado, I just want to say thank you so much again for your time. Thank you, Monigo, for being my co-host, for all of you for being great panelists that you are. And let's continue the conversation. And I'm going to leave you with one question, and that is, what is one thing that the viewers can do to improve either economic wealth or political power? And Chris, I'll start with you. One item. You're on mute. You're on mute. Chris, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. When it comes to economic wealth, I would say that the most important factor is financial literacy. If you don't know how to treat your money, if you don't learn to respect money, then you'll never, ever attain wealth. That would be, in a nutshell, I know we're short on time, but that would be my advice.
Awesome. Thank you. Frank.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback. I'm going to say financial literacy and then education. The two go hand in hand.
Okay. Leah, we've already talked. Monica's already talked about that. And Monique, how about we end it with you?
I would say buy black and vote.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, panelists. And thank you for viewers who have listened to us and spent this hour with us. And hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Thank you. Peace.
Thank you.
At 9 National Network for Equity and Equality, Perspective 360, hosted by Nancy LaMons.